Spider-Man Far From Home will be the 2019 sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming, and perhaps more excitingly, the first MCU movie after Avengers 4. With that in mind, Marvel Studios will have to make it pretty epic, because that fourth Avengers movie won't be an easy act to follow.
Well, you're not wrong.
In this video, we'll run you through some Far From Home fan theories. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It's the best way of keeping up to date with all of ScreenRant's great new videos.
Thank you, Mr. Stark.
Far From Home. It was recently revealed that Spider-Man Far From Home would involve Peter Parker and his classmates on a field trip. Since learning about the fact that some of Far From Home would take place on a field trip in Europe, it's been very easy to assume that the title is solely based on the fact that it will be set in a different part of the world to New York City where Spidey resides. But this theory suggests it might be a little further away than that. Avengers Infinity War ended with Spider-Man having turned to dust on Thanos' different home planet of Titan, and when he's brought back to life, that may be where he finds himself when he returns. With that in mind, Spider-Man Far From Home might actually start with Peter Parker literally billions of miles from his home planet. It would make sense for a movie called Far From Home to involve the titular character attempting to return home from a distant place, but it's hard to imagine how the likes of Mysterio, who we know will be in the movie, would factor in if the whole thing was set in space.
The second law of thermodynamics.
New Spider-People. You're undoubtedly already aware that Sony are trying to create their own Spider movieverse in order to piggyback on the revived success of Spider-Man. Now that Tom Holland is portraying the character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they're releasing a number of villain-centric spin-offs, including Tom Hardy's Venom, and if recent reports are to be believed, Jared Leto's Morbius the Living Vampire. However, if they're really wanting to cash in on Spider-Man's success, they should introduce more Spider-People into their movies. With that in mind, there's a theory that Spider-Man Far From Home will do exactly that. In Spider-Man Homecoming, Tiffany Espenson played a student called Cindy, who some people have theorized could be Cindy Moon, a character who in the comics was bitten by the same spider as Peter Parker, and who became the superhero known as Silk, so she's certainly a potential candidate. A more likely scenario, however, is the introduction of Miles Morales, another character who has used the Spider-Man name in the comics, as his uncle Aaron Davis was portrayed by Donald Glover in Homecoming. It would undoubtedly be cool to see more Spider-People in the MCU, and it would help to differentiate the franchise from previous Spidey offerings too.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
Nick Fury will appear. There's one character who could potentially appear in just about any Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, and that character is former S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury. Fury first appeared in the post-credits scene of the MCU's very first movie, 2008's Iron Man, and he has since made his presence felt in the franchise sporadically, as and when he is needed. Most recently, he appeared in the post-credits scene of Avengers Infinity War, when, along with Cobie Smulders' Maria Hill, he became a victim of Thanos' infamous finger snap. His next appearance will be in the 1990s set Captain Marvel, which in terms of release dates is the movie that comes before Avengers 4, but there's a theory he'll also appear in the Spidey sequel. Samuel L. Jackson has been spotted on the movie's set, and even teased his appearance in the movie publicly. Given that it's looking very unlikely that Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark will be in the movie, Fury could be there to offer Peter Parker a guiding hand in his absence, helping him to become the MCU's foremost superhero.
Captain Marvel, you are needed.
Captain Marvel the Mentor. If what Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige says is true, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be, Brie Larson's Captain Marvel will lead the Marvel Cinematic Universe going forward. Ever since the MCU began back in 2008, it's been Iron Man's duty to do that. He's been the flagship character of the franchise, and given he was Peter Parker's mentor of sorts in Spider-Man Homecoming, this particular theory makes sense. The theory is Brie Larson's Captain Marvel, who's otherwise known as Carol Danvers, could take Stark's place as Peter Parker's mentor in Spider-Man Far From Home. The two characters are obviously very different. Danvers is much older than Parker, female, has a very different power set, and has obviously spent much of her time in space, but that could also make for a very interesting relationship dynamic. Moreover, as someone familiar with space, she could help Parker to cope with any PTSD he has from being beamed up onto Ebony Maw's spaceship or his time fighting Thanos on Titan. One thing's for sure, if Captain Marvel is anywhere near as powerful as we're led to believe she'll be, Spidey will definitely be in safe hands under her mentorship.
Business is good.
A villainous team-up. You would think that Marvel would have learned from Sony's past mistakes that having too many villains in a Spider-Man movie doesn't really work. 2007's Spider-Man 3 essentially killed the first Spider-Man movie franchise, the one with Tobey Maguire playing the titular hero, by having Venom, Sandman, and the new Goblin clogging up the villain roster. Then, 2014's Amazing Spider-Man 2 effectively killed the next Spidey franchise, the one with Andrew Garfield in the starring role, when it had Electro, the Green Goblin, and albeit extremely briefly, Rhino all appearing in it. But according to this theory, Marvel Studios are set to make that very same potential mistake by including multiple villains in Spider-Man Far From Home. We already know Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio will be appearing, and that's a pretty exciting prospect in its own right, because Gyllenhaal's a great actor and Mysterio's a very interesting character. But the theory suggests that the likes of Vulture, Scorpion, and the Prowler might be teaming up with him, with either Norman Osborn or Dr. Octopus as their boss. It would be a risky move, but if anyone could pull it off, it's Marvel Studios.
Stay in school, kids. Stay in school. Otherwise, you're gonna end up like me.
Mr. DELMAR'S identity. In the first MCU Spider-Man movie, 2017 Spider-Man Homecoming, audiences were introduced to the character of Mr. DELMAR, the owner of the local bodega in Queens that Peter Parker got his sandwiches from. Given that the movie's sequel, Spider-Man Far From Home, will be set far away from Queens, it was something of a surprise for fans to learn that Hemke Madera would reprise his role and that Mr. DELMAR would be in it. Given that it's very, very unlikely that by sheer coincidence Mr. DELMAR will be wherever Peter Parker is heading in the movie, there's a theory that there's more to the character than originally met the eye. Some fans have theorized that he could be an undercover S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who, aware of Peter Parker's powers, was assigned to keep an eye on him by playing the role of a bodega owner in his neighborhood. Other fans have theorized that he might be a villain in disguise, learning about Parker's habits, planning an attack, ready to pounce on the young superhero at any given time using his as-yet unrevealed superpowers. Of course, it could just be that part of the movie is actually set in Queens and Mr. DELMAR's just a small business owner who makes a top-notch sandwich. We'll just have to wait and see which of those things turns out to be true.
Hey, kid.
Into the Spider-Verse connections. The upcoming Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse will of course be an animated movie, but there's a theory that it'll be part of, or at least connected to, the live-action Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this extension of that theory suggests Spider-Man Far From Home will depict that connection. In the trailer for the December 2018 animated offering, there was a gravestone with what appeared to be Peter Parker's name on it, and the date of his death was 2018. The only Peter Parker we know of who died in 2018 was Tom Holland's in Avengers Infinity War, and while there was no body to bury, a headstone could still have been made to commemorate his life. Could the grave in the Into the Spider-Verse trailer have belonged to Holland's Spidey? If so, the movie definitely takes place in the MCU, and that would be pretty cool. With that in mind, once Holland's Spidey is resurrected, we could definitely see some references to Into the Spider-Verse, which will already have been out for several months in Far From Home. A Venom crossover. The timing of the Venom movie, which comes out in October of this year, and the title of Spider-Man Far From Home have led some fans to theorize that the two movies will cross over. The Venom movie is of course part of Sony's new franchise, and not therefore officially a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But stranger things have happened than a potential crossover between the two. The Far From Home aspect of the Spider-Man sequel's title could, according to some fans, refer to space, where Spider-Man could come into contact with a Venom symbiote. But it could also refer to Peter Parker ending up in San Francisco, which in the comics at least is where Eddie Brock ends up moving to, becoming its lethal protector. To be fair to those who conceived this theory, it really is about time that Spider-Man and Venom met on the big screen in a manner that didn't completely suck. 2007's Spider-Man saw Topher Grace as the black symbiotic character, and he was arguably the worst comic book movie villain of all time. Tom Hardy is sure to nail the role, and having his world clash with that of Tom Holland's Spider-Man would undoubtedly be fantastic.
Spider-Man.
Shattered Dimensions. In the Spider-Man comic books, animated television series, and video games, such as 2010's Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, Spider-Man has had a tendency to cross over into other dimensions on a fairly regular basis. As a consequence of that, one theory about Spider-Man Far From Home suggests the Webbed Wonder could actually be traveling even further from home than he did in Avengers Infinity War, when he ended up on the planet Titan, by venturing into another dimension or even another era in time. It would be the first time Spidey has done that in a live-action movie, and for fans of the character who aren't familiar with his adventures in other media, this would be a real treat, as they'd potentially get to see different versions of Spidey on the big screen, versions who wouldn't otherwise get a cinematic adaptation of their own. Of course, with Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio in the mix, any such trips to bizarre places could end up being fabricated illusions that didn't really happen, and that in itself would be pretty cool to see. All that being said, with the animated Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse being based around a very similar concept to this theory, and potentially linking it in with Spider-Man Far From Home, this seems unlikely. Journey through the afterlife. As you already know, Avengers Infinity War ended with the heartbreaking results of Thanos' devastating finger snap taking effect, which wiped out half of all life in the universe. Several Marvel Cinematic Universe heroes fell victim to the snap, including Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Scarlet Witch, Falcon, Bucky Barnes, Star-Lord, Drax, Mantis, Groot, Nick Fury, and Maria Hill. But none of those deaths were more difficult to watch than that of Spider-Man's. Peter Parker died on Titan in Tony Stark's arms, begging Stark to help him while saying he didn't want to die. But we all know he's coming back. This theory suggests that the first part of Spider-Man Far From Home will see Peter Parker in the afterlife, assessing his life choices and going on a literally spiritual journey, before being brought back to life and coming to terms with the fact that he had previously died. It's probably the most far-fetched and out there theory on this list, but it's also undoubtedly one of the most intriguing. Seeing Tom Holland's Peter Parker being aware of his own death, and at first at least dealing with actually being dead, would be extremely interesting and unlike any other Marvel movie ever made. It would also work given the movie's title, because there's nowhere further from home than the afterlife after all.
Gotta say, that's awesome.
And that's the end of our video. Did you enjoy it? What do you think of these Spider-Man Far From Home theories? Do you have any of your own? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to ScreenRant for more great videos like this one. Bye for now!